All right. Good afternoon, arts advocates, and welcome to Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund's office hours with our arts advocacy team. My name is Morgan Fernari. I'm the manager at the Arts Action Fund. I am a 28-year-old white woman with freckles and auburn hair, which is in a half up, half down hairstyle. I'm wearing a collared button-up brown patterned shirt and sitting in front of two brown bookshelves in my home in Miami, Florida. Americans for the Arts is committed to accessibility, and this includes our speakers offering visual descriptions of themselves, which makes the webinar more accessible for audience members that are blind or have low vision. Additionally, there are Zoom-generated closed captions for audience members. You can access the closed captions by selecting the CC button in the Zoom toolbar. This webinar also includes live American Sign Language interpretation, which can be accessed by clicking on the globe icon in the Zoom toolbar as well, and you select ASL interpretation. We welcome our interpreters, Gina and Lucy, and thank them for their help today. Next slide. We want you to ask your questions. So if you have a question, please access the Q&A feature, which is also located in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. That way you can ask our speakers questions throughout the webinar. We will do our best to answer all questions either by responding through the Q&A feature or aloud during the allotted Q&A segments during the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available for you to watch and share in the next coming days, week, and you will also be able to find additional resources on our office hours landing page. The link is being shared in the chat now. I want you to know that also you can visit that site to see all of the upcoming office hours sessions, which you can register for now. In the event that we aren't able to answer all of your questions today, you can feel free to reach out to Americans for the Arts' Public Policy Manager, Olivia Tarpley, and we can all keep in touch. Next slide. Showing here is the agenda for today's session, which will begin with a legislative update from Tushar Swain, followed by two interviews moderated by Nina Azutunjali. The first will be with Lynette Labinger and Erica Lauren Ortiz. The second will be with Natalie Ossenfort. We will then have a Q&A session after each panel that Nina will lead. And at the end, I will be back to share some additional information about taking action, upcoming office hours, and some projects Americans for the Arts is currently doing. Please go to the next slide. So just reintroducing our staff speakers, of course, there is myself, Morgan Fernari, Arts Action Fund Manager. There is Tushar Swain, Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts, and Nina Azutunjali, who is both the Executive Director of the Arts Action Fund and the Chief Counsel at Americans for the Arts. Next slide. And today, here are our expert speakers joining us. We are so thrilled to have them all. We have Lynette Labinger, who's coordinating counsel at the ACLU. We have Erica Lauren Ortiz, who is the lead advocacy and governance programs at Theater Communications Group, or as you know, TCG. We also have Natalie Ossenfort, who is the program director for Boulder Advocacy at Alliance for Justice. And to finish out, we'll have Alora Young, who is a poet and multi-talented artist. We're so thrilled to have her coming in and reading for us to celebrate National Arts and Humanities Month. Next slide. Okay, so now we'll come back to our take action, but I'm going to introduce Tushar Swain.
Thank you, Morgan. Hello, everyone. Happy National Arts and Humanities Month. My name is Tushar Swain. I am Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts. I'm a middle-aged man with brown skin. I have a bald head. Today I'm wearing my glasses. I'm wearing a purple shirt. I'm in my office with some pictures behind me. And again, thank you for joining us today. Here in Washington, D.C., our focus remains on the federal government shutdown. It's now in its 17th day, and the shutdown has become the third longest in US history. Unfortunately, the posture in Congress remains unchanged, with the Senate scheduled to return on Monday, October 20th, for its 11th vote on the House passed continuing resolution that Congress tried passing before the shutdown occurred. At issue is extending health care subsidies that were expanded during the pandemic for the Affordable Care Act exchanges. Democrats want the extension to be a part of this continuing resolution. They're making the case that open enrollment for health insurance has begun in some states and will begin in November for most states. And Republicans want to deal with it separately, saying that there will be ample time to debate this. So what does that mean for our cultural agencies? The NEA has issued its agency operations during the shutdown, stating that when a funding lapse arises, the agency will retain staff working in support of the National Garden of Heroes, as well as actions that directly support America 250. I think the hope is that funds can outlast the government shutdown, but of course, that depends on a multitude of factors, most important being, of course, how long the shutdown lasts. At the NEH, the Trump administration fired 22 of the 26 members of the National Council on the Humanities, all but 4 members of the council, which advises the National Endowment for the Humanities on funding priorities. All received emails informing them that they had been fired. We continue to monitor that situation and decisions at the NEH moving forward. At the Institute of Museum and Library Services, they are completely closed due to the government shutdown. As a result, IMLS is not engaged in grant making or other agency activities, and they are not reviewing or responding to any form of communication. No payments for discretionary grant programs will be made by IMLS until the government shutdown ends. And then additionally, the Office of Management and Budget have maintained that they have even more authority for reductions in force at government agencies during the shutdown. A long time theory that's been held by its director, Russell Vogt, long before he came into the position. And now it has begun to put that into practice. With over 4,200 employees that have been let go, including at the Department of Education, which we focus on because of the implications on arts education. We just saw RIFs there, 450 firings added to the 1,300 plus that were employees that were let go due to Doge cuts earlier this year. This has depleted the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is tasked to improve the achievement of preschool, elementary, and secondary students. Reports are saying that that office has actually dwindled down to only 15 employees, as well as significant cuts at offices that implement the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, as well as the Office of Civil Rights. And then finally, when the government does reopen, we want to continue to be vigilant of fiscal year 2026 appropriations funding, asking members of Congress to support funding levels on the Senate side and the Senate appropriations bills for our cultural agencies, so NEA, NEH, IMLS, and the Department of Education, again, which oversees a lot of well-rounded programs that are important to arts education. And Morgan will let you know about some of those opportunities for you at the end of the webinar. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Nina Osley-Tunjali. Nina, take it away.
Thank you, Tushar. Um, Welcome, everybody. I am happy to host two different panels today. Both will have a lot of legal overlay on it. But let me first begin by providing a visual self-description of myself. I am a middle-aged woman, Middle Eastern with short black hair, and I have an Arts Vote backdrop behind me that was designed exclusively for the Arts Action Fund by the very well-known artist Shepard Fairey. Um, so the first panel I'm going to begin with is regarding a very important update on the lawsuit that was taken by theater groups, including Theater Communications Group, Erica Lauren Ortiz's organization, where she serves as the Advocacy and Governance Program lead at TCG. And they worked with the ACLU of Rhode Island, and one of the collaborating counsel attorneys that ACLU of Rhode Island works with is Lynette Labinger, who is very involved in this lawsuit. And I can see it brings a big smile to Erica's face because she represented them well. So I'm going to first start off with you, Erica. Before you answer this question, if you could first describe yourselves for the audience. And what I'm going to ask you is to begin with an updated timeline of how things got started. I know we did a webinar back in April that you also participated in, and Vera with the ACLU of Rhode Island participated in that one. And we gave an update leading up to the injunction, but I think it's helpful to begin from the beginning, a quick timeline of where we are, and then we'll hand it over to Lynette. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina, for inviting me. My name again is Erica Lauren Ortiz, and I am a Black woman. I have fabulous long black hair, a pink dress, and a large smile. And I'm Zooming today from the ancestral lands of the Taino people in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I will just start by saying that I'm so glad that Tushar came before and talked about the advocacy for the agency, because TCG still remains and did during the time of the suit one of the biggest advocates for the National Endowment and for federal funding and federal support of the arts. And so even just the timeline as I describe it, hopefully will give people some insight into how we balance that and our true, engagement and love and support for the agency while making sure that we had this funding remain independent and accessible for all. So on January the 21st, as the slew of executive orders came out, the president issued Executive Order 14168 that was about defending women from gender extremism and illegal gender ideology. And that same week, we were having webinars talking about the pending federal funding freeze from the Office of Management and Budget, and just educating our members on what could potentially happen if federal funds were frozen and while they were reviewed by the Office of Management and by all the different government agencies who were reacting to the slew of executive orders that were coming out. And so we were hearing from our members quite quickly in January and February, in those last weeks of January especially, just about how concerned they were about applying for the latest round of applications for the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as how concerned they were about their current grants and the impact that these executive orders might have on them. Our first virtual session, that was sort of a pop-up session, had over 1,000 people attend. And we asked them what were some of the things that were on their mind. And one of the biggest was that this illegal gender ideology and illegal DEI in particular, those two things had such a chilling effect on their applications. We had a number of member theaters who were saying that they support trans artists, they support artists of color, that they were unsure if these new restrictions would conflict with their values. And in February, as the agency actually came out with their assurance of compliance, they spelled out that grant applications would have to comply with those executive orders that we had already been educating our audience about. And so as we continue to provide resources for advocacy, to continue to talk to our members about some of the specific instances, we were introduced by some of our member theaters to the ACLU team in Rhode Island. And they were in conversation with the National Queer Theater, Rhode Island Latino Arts, and the Theater Offensive. And we, as the National Service Organization for Nonprofit Theaters, had a lot of considerations to do in terms of, if we could, in fact, join a lawsuit with the ACLU, and what the impact would be for our member community. And the reason why I shared all of the backstory is that, we were receiving a lot of feedback that this would just have a total chilling effect on the applications that they were going to be providing. It was very confusing. It seemed very arbitrary. And to the agency's credit, they were trying to move very quickly in putting out this information. So it also seemed as if there was a very quick assault, towards the foundational artistic excellence and merit that their grant applications were based upon before. And so on March 6th, TCG officially joined the ACLU lawsuit as a co-plaintiff. And one of the reasons why we took that consideration is that in talking with the ACLU team, we were encouraged that if we joined, our members would likely be protected, and that we could extend that through the broadest swath of people as possible. And so TCG joining as a service organization representing members all over the country would actually protect a lot more of the theaters in our community versus the individual co-plaintiffs. And so we decided to join the suit. Throughout the summer, Lynette can probably share with you a little bit more of the timeline of some of the legal challenges and the way in which the agency reacted. And then the final motion for summary judgment and our victory decisively in September. On September 19th, we got the good news that we were actually really successful. And it almost took us a little while to even realize that it was such a decisive victory. And we're really glad that we were able to join, because in our advocacy for the agency, we just want to make the agency better, more accessible for everyone who might want to apply for a grant. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Erica. That's very helpful as to how it bubbled up to get to where we are. Lynette, what I'm going to ask you to begin with after you do a self-description is to pick up with what was the temporary relief and what happened in between leading up to this final district court decision and where it goes in the future. Lynette.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Erica, for that description. So I'm supposed to describe myself, and I'm looking at the color content on my Zoom, and I don't think it's very accurate because I'm actually wearing a burgundy blazer, not black, which it looks like here, and a burgundy and plaid, a burgundy turtleneck and a burgundy and plaid blazer. So it's not coming up right, but that's short hair. I'm well beyond middle age, guys. And I'm in my office in Providence, Rhode Island, and behind me is my favorite artwork on the wall. And on the table behind me are pictures of my grandchildren and family. And so I work with the ACLU of Rhode Island. In this case, it was a joint effort led by the Free Speech Project of the National Office of the ACLU and Vera Eidelman, who had spoke with you all last spring. We pulled together, as Erica said, several individual theater programs, including the Rhode Island Latino Arts, which gave us the anchor in Rhode Island to proceed here. And then the TCG, which really, as Erica said, gave us a lot more coverage. We did, I guess, anticipate the concern which bubbled up from the Supreme Court later on this summer about the use of nationwide injunctions, that the disfavoring of it, that we needed to maximize, if we were successful in getting relief, maximize those who would benefit from it. And so it was very important for TCG to join us and not just individual groups. When we started the case, there was a requirement that in order to get through the portal and file your grants application, you had to certify that you would comply with this requirement to not promote gender ideology. Once we filed the suit and claimed that we needed urgent relief because of that, NEA pulled back and withdrew that requirement. They said they were going to come up with something else, and that they would do that by mid-April and announce it by the end of April, which was still after the time that these grants applications were due. We pressed forward on our application, and the court issued a preliminary decision in April that went with us every step of the way except the last one. Found that we were likely to succeed on our claims, that we faced irreparable harm, that the case was not moot because they had withdrawn the initial certification requirement, but the judge wanted to give them time to formulate their new policy, which they were going to announce at the end of April, and so technically did not grant an injunction, basically saying nothing's going to change until this gets to a later stage. So we all pressed forward. The NEA did issue its determination, which it called a final notice, that it announced publicly at the end of April. And it was basically a legal argument about why they were entitled to consider every grant award that they made to be not the expression of the theater group or other group applying for the funding, but rather the message of the government. And this case primarily was decided on whether this was called something called government speech, where the government is taking a position and expressing its own message, or private speech, meaning the decision making and the production values of the artists. And depending on which way that fell, was pretty much going to determine the outcome. So they spent a lot of time in what they called the final notice, self-serving, explaining why it was government speech. But what they said about what they were going to do in the decision-making process was ambiguous, and the court let us ask 3 questions. And as a result of the answers to those 3 questions, it was very clear that the NEA's position was that it would not consider whether a grant applicant was the proposed project was promoting gender ideology at any step in the process until it got through all the many layers of review for artistic merit and artistic excellence. When it got to the desk of the NEA chair, would be the only time that the chair would evaluate or might evaluate if it promoted gender ideology. And if it did, the chair could hold that as a negative. It was never going to be a positive. It might be a neutral, but it could be a negative. And the court, after deciding that, yes, in fact, this is private speech, not government speech, a really well reasoned decision, and went through every various step in all the case law, said that because it is private speech, taking one side on the issue on gender, this so-called gender ideology issue, that if it promotes it, we're against it, is what we call viewpoint discrimination. And that is subject to First Amendment review of the highest level. And they really, the government didn't really mount a serious defense once it lost on the government speech issue. And the court ruled that the final notice, that whole document, was being stayed. It's called a vacatur. I'm not quite sure of the correct pronunciation, but basically it's put to one side. It cannot be used, and also granted permanent injunctive relief to each of the plaintiffs, which means also TCG's members. And that was, as Erica said, September 19. The government has 60 days to appeal, so we're in that waiting period where we don't know whether they're going to appeal or not. And I assume they're going forward on the review process, and I don't know whether that's held up at all by the shutdown.
Yeah. Lynette, first of all, congratulations to you, Lynette and Erica. Thank goodness for your organization for stepping in and doing this and being a national leader. Lynette, I have a question. Does this only apply to theater groups or any kind of NEA grantee?
It applies to the final notice. The final notice applies to the grant applications that are subject to it.
So everything from dance, music, theater, everybody who applied under that category.
Yes, and of course the analysis is right there for anyone who feels that they're not already covered by it, that they're applying under the statute for any kind of grant that's not directly covered by it. Is, the analysis would be right there, spot on, for any other type of grant.
And Lynette, I'm assuming this is like very substantial precedence, legal precedence that's been established, that a grant given by the NEA, while it might seem incredibly obvious that it's not government speech when they give a grant to an organization that's only paying at most 50% of that and not making decisions on production and things like that, as you mentioned. But is this in fact precedence? Is this what, this has never been determined by any courts before, that grants made by the NEA are not government speech?
Well, it was never asserted before. In this context, the main case in the past was the Finley case that had to do with restrictions on what was considered exceeding standards of decency. And the U.S. Supreme Court presaged this issue, saying, this case would be another issue if it was making decisions on the basis of the viewpoint. And that was many years ago, but I don't think it doesn't seem like the government had given the nature of the statute and how the statute so clearly, historically, and even with all of its amendments, has always stated Congress's viewpoint that we're here to support the arts, not to dictate what they do, is very classically not government speech. That's basically providing economic support and, whatever prestige of the government to artists, not to say here's what we want you to do. So it was it was perhaps the most obvious argument that they could make, because without it, it was just so clearly viewpoint discrimination. If you're just taking one side of the issue and saying, you know, not arguing that we're going, we don't want to have this topic discussed, but we only want to have one side of the topic discussed, is classic viewpoint discrimination.
Right. And so in the end, the takeaway is, as a result of the temporary injunction that you got, um, the NEA took away the assurance of compliance. There's no more assurance of compliance related to gender ideology. And as a result of this district court final decision on the merits of the case, they vacated the final memo of how they would adjudicate gender ideology. So it's a clean win, and we're awaiting to see if there will be an appeal.
That's correct. It's very, I mean, there was one argument that the judge didn't rule our way, but it did not make a difference to the outcome.
Okay. And I'm assuming you're all on board to handle an appeal if it comes up.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Morgan, can I ask if there are any questions from the audience?
Yes, absolutely. We have one anonymous question. I can go ahead and read it out loud. It says, I know you talked about winning the lawsuit related to grant award decisions. However, how does that work with attestations, organizations? Are they required to make if they submit the federal funding? Sorry, a little bit funky, but does that make sense?
So, I think that the
Attestation.
question is, yeah, the attestation would be the assurance of compliance that we are discussing. And in that case, as Nina described just now, that has been set aside. What was great about the judge's ruling is he also spelled out some of the things that were really specific about that gender ideology really does not relate to the concept of merit or artistic excellence or decency, respect for diverse beliefs. All of those things are in the NEA's founding statute. And so really grant making moving forward should be focusing on those things according to what he's saying. So that really helped, I think, just in terms of moving forward, what will show up in future assurances.
Yeah. We are running out of time. I did notice, Morgan, there were two more questions that immediately popped up.
Yes.
One of them I'm going to just answer quickly. It's regarding the DEI attestation. This is a big topic, as Lynette shared with me the other day in explaining things. I'd like to invite Lynette to come back and explain what's going on DEI in the court systems and how it might be applicable here. I hope you'll be able to do that, Lynette, at a future date. But the second question I read it real quickly, but if you could read that, I think it's worth just going over a little bit and we'll handle that one.
Wonderful. I'll read it out loud. Okay.
Yes.
It says, why can't the same protections be accomplished for the principles and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Oh, okay.
And why hasn't there been a class action on the NEA grant terminations like there has been for NEH grant terminations?
Oh, okay. So they are
Definitely.
related. Okay. I don't know if there's a quick answer or if this is to be continued.
The
I can
one
just say
quick answer.
timeline.
Sorry.
I'll hand it to Lynette, but I will just say that timeline-wise, one of the reasons why TCG wasn't challenging directly the DEI executive order as well is that there was a preliminary injunction at the time in which we entered into this lawsuit. And so just as I was describing, there were other legal challenges that were already proceeding at the same time.
And the other thing is there is a distinction between the terminations, which mostly takes you into administrative appeals and to the Court of Federal Claims. And where we're challenging was applications for upcoming grants, which is not governed by that obstacle. I'm just going to call it an obstacle for purposes of litigating these cases. So it's a different path. I assume that a lot of those are being explored as well. And your grantees because we're the ACLU of Rhode Island, along with other organizations, have brought a number of challenges to other federal agencies' certification requirements, and they keep adding them. So one has to stay vigilant when you get the grant to read through everything carefully and see if there's something there that you need that doesn't sit right, because they might add something else.
Yeah, so I really want to commit that Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund will do a dedicated webinar on this DEI material. But we might learn a little bit with our upcoming panel that's right after yours. So I want to thank you, Erica. I want to thank you, Lynette, for educating us on what's happened up to date, and look forward to seeing you both soon.
Thank you.
I now would like to bring on a panel of two, me and Natalie, to begin discussing, and that's Natalie Ossenfort. She is the program director of the Alliance for Justice's Boulder Advocacy Program, and now overseeing the Alliance for Justice's collaboration with a group called We the Action, and the creation of this new nonprofit legal defense network. So before I ask the question, Natalie, could you please do a little self-visual description?
Of course, and thank you, Nina, for inviting me to participate today in this panel. My name is Natalie Ossenfort. I'm the Program Director of Alliance for Justice's Boulder Advocacy Program. I am a middle-aged white woman with reddish blonde hair. I've got it tied up into a bun today, but you can't really see that on the back of my head. And I'm sitting in my home in Dallas, Texas, and behind me on the wall are 3 framed degrees and certifications from my various law school and legal endeavors. But again, thanks for having me. Excited to talk about it.
Thank you, Natalie. So when Natalie and I had our pre-discussion, I was all in on going straight to their newest program, which is that nonprofit legal defense network. But as I spoke with her, I realized we need to build up to it. So I'm going to ask her to first talk about her long-running Boulder Advocacy Program and the tools there, what it can do and what it cannot do, and then move on to the nonprofit risk assessments that are now clinics and attorney-guided clinics that are part of the new nonprofit legal defense network, and then touch on where possibly the baton can be handed if they actually need a pro bono attorney through We the Action.
Wonderful. Yeah. So Alliance for Justice's Boulder Advocacy Program has been around for decades. Alliance for Justice, just for everyone's awareness, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our Boulder Advocacy Program is really designed to help nonprofits engage in advocacy boldly and effectively while staying within the confines of what the law allows. And so we really are experts on the federal tax code rules that apply to nonprofit advocacy, on the state laws and local laws that sometimes can kick in if you're engaging in legislative advocacy, for example, or maybe ballot measure work as well. And so we have kind of a trio of different resources. We have workshops and webinars that we do for individual nonprofits, but we also do public webinars and on-demand content as well that really cover those rules and explain how C3s can engage safely in the policymaking process. We also offer free technical assistance to any nonprofit of any shape, any size in the U.S. And so if you happen to have a one-off question about, whether you can say that, whether you can host this candidate at your nonprofit event, we can't provide legal advice through our Boulder Advocacy Program, but we can help you navigate the guardrails in terms of what you're allowed to do. And so that free technical assistance service is available for any nonprofit. But in addition to those workshops and webinars and that free technical assistance, we also have hundreds of written legal resources on our website. And so if you want to dive in deep, for example, on the election season advocacy rules for C3s, we've got guides on that. We've got fact sheets on that. And then in more recent years, we actually added a little bit of a fourth fun thing. And so if anyone wants to totally nerd out with us every other Wednesday, we have a new podcast episode that comes out that explains issues related to nonprofit advocacy. And that's called The Rules of the Game Boulder Advocacy Podcast. And you can find it on any major podcast platform. But that's really what our Boulder Advocacy program does. Now, historically, that Boulder Advocacy program has stopped short of providing legal advice. We've stopped short of providing legal representation, but especially in recent months, we're getting a lot of questions from nonprofits that need more help, that need more customized and tailored assistance geared towards their particular legal needs. And so we teamed up recently, and this gets to the network that you mentioned, Nina. We teamed up with a nonprofit organization called We the Action. Their website is just wetheaction.org. But we are partnering with them on what we are calling the Nonprofit Legal Defense Network. And so what this does is it will allow nonprofit organizations across the country to sign up for clinics. We're actually hosting our first clinic next week. It will allow volunteer attorneys from across the US to sign up to work these clinics. And so they'll be providing some pro bono assistance. At the clinics, no legal advice is going to be given. There won't be an official attorney-client relationship that is formed. But what the lawyers are there to do is to help the nonprofits walk through our advocacy checkup tool at Boulder Advocacy, which essentially is a self-assessment that groups can work through question by question to help identify potential gaps in their compliance. And so particularly for groups who think they might be under threat, under the possibility of attack from the administration or perhaps state officials, this is a real good way that they can cross their T's, dot their I's to see what those compliance gaps might be. And by signing up through the Nonprofit Legal Defense Network for one of these clinics, you can have a lawyer walk you through that questionnaire, help you understand what the terminology means so that then you can self-identify any legal issues that you might need to seek out formal legal representation or advice on.
Great. So the clinics, are they with a lot of different organizations and one attorney walking them through for that state or generally, or can you actually ask for a clinic unique to your organization so people can gather around multiple staff members from that one organization to provide a custom risk assessment?
That's really what it is, the latter, what you
Okay.
just described. So it's not state by state. We're not doing a clinic for Texas and then a clinic for Florida. Nonprofits can sign up, and then depending on when they're available and when we have lawyers available, they will be put during that clinic in a Zoom room with a lawyer, and there will be one lawyer paired with each organization. Now, the organization could choose to have more than one person from the organization participate. Because some of the questions, it might be easier to have an executive director answer. Other questions, maybe the accounting staff is more equipped to help answer.
Right.
But the idea is that during these intake clinics, again, no legal advice given at that point, but we will have one lawyer paired with each clinic participant, so each nonprofit participant to walk through that advocacy checkup tool.
Can you give us a sense of some of the kinds of questions? And I'm assuming the answers remain confidential and never leave that Zoom.
Of course, yes, yeah, no, it's all confidential. And honestly, and I'll drop a link here. I'll have to pull it up, but I'll drop a link to our advocacy checkup tool in the chat as well. And anyone can look at that, go online, download the PDF. We intentionally made that so that it's not a form where you're clicking on answers and get a score at the end by clicking submit. We don't have any need to maintain that information. It really is a self-assessment for the organization to identify potential gaps in their compliance, and we don't need to know what their gaps are, right? So we don't collect that data. You just download the PDF, maybe print it out. You can kind of work through it on your own, or if you want to do it with a lawyer to help you understand the terminology, they'll help you through this clinical process. But that's really what that tool is designed to do. Now, the questions come in a number of different topic areas. There's a section on lobbying. There's a section on election season advocacy, which includes questions about ballot measure activities. There's a section on fundraising and grant making and whether you receive grants from government sources, private foundations. There are questions along those lines because, of course, different grant agreements come with different contractual requirements. And so, basically asking questions to find out whether you have systems in place to ensure that you're complying with those grant agreements. On the policy front, there's a section on ballot measures. One of the things that I think is really unique about direct democracy and participating in ballot measures is that it's a lobbying activity according to the tax code that has to be tracked against, for example, a C3's lobbying limits. But it also happens in the election context. And so if a group decides they want to advocate for or against a ballot measure, they not only need to be tracking that against their lobbying limits as a C3 public charity, but they also are probably going to be subject to state level campaign finance and election reporting requirements because it's happening in kind of two different bodies of law. And so the questions really are geared, they're kind of yes, no, I don't know type answers, but they really are geared towards helping groups spot where there might be gaps. And so if, for example, they are participating in ballot measure advocacy, but then they check the box saying, no, we don't have a system in place, or no, we haven't reported with the state our ballot measure activities, then that could potentially indicate a gap where they might not currently be complying with a law that they should be complying with. And so then at that point, if they identify that as one of their weaknesses, they could then seek out legal assistance to get support with that particular question or that particular issue.
I'm not sure if this has already been thought through on your end, or maybe it has, and that is there anything like maybe not a certification that you completed successfully, like all the right answers to this, or that you just took the class, you participated in the clinic, just because I could see foundations feeling more comfortable knowing that they would be giving you money if you have taken that self-assessment.
Yeah, I mean, we have noticed, and we've been talking with a lot of funders, particularly private foundations and community foundations, not so much government grant makers, but foundations, and they are interested in their grantees doing these types of self-assessments, and several of them have actually suggested that they might want to host a clinical program specifically for their grantees, right? So that they can encourage their people to engage in this. So I definitely think there is an interest. We don't offer any sort of certification. Again, we don't collect the data, so we're not going to be there's not going to be any congratulations, you got a perfect score type of emails or certificates going out afterwards. But that's intentional. But certainly if groups are wanting to have our assistance, we can kind of help them understand the questions and walk them through that content.
There are some groups that are C3s and have a C4 or a C6. Are all of those eligible for this service?
Yeah, so the nonprofit legal defense network and the clinical program that we're running with We the Action, that really is geared towards C3 organizations specifically. We at Alliance for Justice and our affiliated C4, the Alliance for Justice Action campaign, are in the process of creating a similar tool for C4 organizations, but it has not been released yet. So we're happy to provide information about that once it becomes available. This particular program really is geared towards C3s. That said, there is a section in the self-assessment in the advocacy checkup tool about affiliated organizations, because one of the things is, if you're operating affiliated, maybe a C3 with an affiliated C4, you've got to have firewalls in place between the organizations to make sure that you're protecting each organization's own tax exempt status. And so there is a section in that that really asks about, whether you have a cost sharing agreement and whether you're following it, because those really become important considerations, especially if you are operating multiple organizations that are affiliated in their mission.
And are you doing the cost sharing agreement annually, updating it?
Exactly, right? So yeah, a lot of different questions along that. Are you sharing staff? Are you sharing office space? How do you determine who's paying for what?
Okay, let's use this example of a cost sharing agreement or some other kind of a document that would be important to have. And they actually are now looking, because they don't have a lot of money, for a pro bono attorney who knows this and can assist them. What is a possible, not guaranteed, next step for them? I asked it correctly.
Yeah, possible. One possible next step is, the group that we're partnering with, We the Action, they have a network of thousands of attorneys scattered across the country, all with different areas of expertise. So some of them might be contract specialists, some of them might be immigration law specialists, criminal law specialists, but it kind of runs the gamut. And they take on nonprofit partners, allow nonprofit partners to post jobs on kind of their job board. And so if there is something, if you realize that your C3 and C4 don't have a cost sharing agreement, and you need one, and you need someone to draft one for you, you could post that request via We the Action, and any of the lawyers in their pro bono network could then volunteer to take on that particular project. So that is one option that is out there. And if you go to that main We the Action homepage, which I think someone dropped the link, thank you, Olivia, in the chat, scroll down to the very bottom, there's a link that says apply to be a nonprofit partner, and you would just fill out that form, and that's how you start the process of being able to tap into We the Action's network of pro bono attorneys, and they actually are able to give you legal advice and legal representation, assuming someone's available to volunteer for your particular request.
Right. So it's not a guarantee, but it's
Correct.
a very good start.
It's something. It's better than nothing, right?
And I checked it out in advance, and there is a drop-down bar for the type of nonprofit, and arts nonprofit is one of the options. So I can assure you of that. Let me see if we have any questions from our audience. Morgan, can you let us know?
Yeah, we've answered a lot of them through writing, but I did want to bring up one that was interesting to me, and thank you again for sharing what you did, because it's a really important topic. Are there resources for artists who are experiencing homelessness and their rights and fighting for their rights? Do we have
So they're
anything?
not a nonprofit, but they're just individual artists,
Yeah,
and specifically on that topic.
yes.
We don't have any resources at Alliance for Justice Boulder Advocacy that specifically speak to that, but Nina, I don't know if there's anyone else in your network that you know of.
In more than half the states around the country, there are state lawyers, fill in the blank, Virginia Lawyers for the Arts, or Texas. In Texas, there's Texas Lawyers for the Arts, Texas accountants even for the arts. They might handle maybe pro bono individual artists questions. Otherwise, I would suggest contacting the closest local arts agency or state arts agency to see if they have suggestions that are unique to that state, that locality, on where to go for assistance. That's one of the things that they would be responsible for knowing, probably, as a unit of government.
Thank you both for your answers there. I thought that was important to bring up. There are two more things that I want to bring up here. Meredith Badler, who is also out of Colorado, she wanted to do a quick shout out. She said, there are also over 20 volunteer lawyers for the arts programs and organizations across the country. There may be a VLA in your state or region that can help. So thank you,
that's what I
Meredith, for
just said.
sharing that. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure to uplift that. And then someone anonymous just posted something. It says, sorry, so for the self-assessment and then the clinic and then the self-assess, do you bring your self-assessment with you to the clinic, I believe is what they mean. Just trying to understand the steps. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I did see another question as well. How do we sign up for a clinic? So there is a website, nonprofitdefense.org, that really is geared towards the partnership we have with We the Action. And on that website, nonprofitdefense.org, there's a link to a tab that's all about nonprofits. So go to that, navigate to the nonprofit section. That'll explain how you can get your name in the hat to sign up for one of the clinics. But the idea with the clinic itself is you can come and, if you've had time to kind of think through and look through the questions and answer some of them in advance, great, absolutely bring that with you. But if you don't have time, it's about a 90-minute window that you're going to have with that lawyer. And so you can actually work through that in real time with the lawyer who's assigned to your nonprofit in that private Zoom room between the two of you. So don't feel like you have to do it all in advance. But certainly if you've been able to work through parts of it, then you might come in with more specific questions that you need to get answered in terms of terminology and why certain questions are important on that. But you don't have to do a clinic to do the self-assessment. You can just download it and work through it yourself. And we're happy to help with any technical assistance questions related to that. But if you do want to do a clinic, hop over to nonprofitdefense.org and express your interest there.
And Natalie, would this make sense if we put together a 90-minute webinar where it's just going through the self-assessment clinic. Now, of course, we're a national organization. We wouldn't be doing it at that moment, at least, for ourselves, but rather for people to start getting comfortable with what are the questions asked. So whether you're in Hawaii, New York City, or Alaska, it would be relevant to them if we were to host something like that.
Yeah, I think so. We've done that for other groups before. And so if folks are wanting kind of a walkthrough of the tool, just so that they understand what the sections are and why we ask the questions that we ask, I think that's something we could work on. Probably 60 minutes is probably fine, but
Okay, good.
Okay,
So looks like we're going to be inviting you or one of your colleagues back. Okay, Morgan, I'm going to hand it back to you now for our poet. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nina, and thank you to all of our speakers. I want to just say that Olivia and other people who have been putting links in the Q&A and in the chat, thank you so much. There are resources there. Thank you for your suggestions. I can really see us as a community pulling together for that, and I appreciate it. And I hope we can continue to share these kinds of resources with one another to make sure we're all supporting our fellow artists. So thank you again. I'm very excited to be introducing our acclaimed poet today, Alora Young. She is with us to share a reading to celebrate National Arts and Humanities Month. So thank you so much, Alora, for being with us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. So I will be reading a poem that I wrote for this organization, and hopefully it brings you a semblance of optimism. I knew poems before I knew myself. I've learned that art is the truest form of wealth. In my mind, lyrics dove and danced beautifully. Art gave me my deepest wish, a community to which I could belong, no matter who I was, where there was no way to be wrong as long as you had love for the stage or the page, the brush or the pen. If you had art in your heart, then you were one of them. Artists are our history. These are the stories that bleed. These are the people who remember us. These are the crafts that we need. They entice you with majesty and turn it on its head and leave you with the answers you never knew you needed in their stead. Art will always remember Audre Lorde, who was a poet well before her time, a Black lesbian mother, a warrior in kind. She wrote about Black love and cancer and said many things deeply true. She said that poetry is not a luxury. It's a vital thing we do. How do you measure the power of a soul's creation that is stored at the core of our aching nation, that calls all who feel alone, says to emerge from your home, shows you something new and bright, replaces sorrow with delight? In 2022, arts and culture generated $151 billion. We are not the starving artists of our forefathers. 2.6 million jobs, each artist ignited against the odds. We are the backbones of our homes, the keepers of the people. Even when the city dwindles, in art we are all equal. Every time you attend a local play, admire a mural, a handmade jewelry display, you inspire an artist to create another day, to turn our cities to kaleidoscopes instead of dire gray. We all have in our lifetimes seen things we loved destroyed, fading memories of things we once enjoyed. This world makes it hard to see the shining light. Often it feels like we're facing an eternal night, but painters turn our villages into gold-lined streets, and a singer brings the music back to everyone she meets, and poets make our towns sound like places worth living in, and speakers make you want to be a better kind of citizen. The arts open new avenues of thought and force people out of their comfort zones. I find compassion for my enemies because the arts build empathy for people of every race, age, and gender identity. Art will always remember Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was a painter, a neo-expressionist who turned neighborhood graffiti into art so resonant that it defined the era of the Big Apple in the 80s. Rollerblades and shades and all we lost to AIDS. He defined the dichotomy of a people. When I was hopeless and oppressed, my art was there beside me. I survived on words alone, and hope grew back inside me when I was bullied to my ends, when I had no faith or friends, only a sorrow that extends, but I had poetry, a reason to get out of bed, to take a breath and sage the space, clear the cobwebs from my head. My heart would beat to the rhythm of my own spoken word. Through misery and OCD, a drumming song was heard. I will always love the arts. They restore my faith in humanity. They cry out through constant crisis. They remind me to listen. They remind me we are all part of one universe, pieces in a grand tapestry of life, singing vast oceans of hard emotions, molding like clay your strife, piercing passion, pulling pens across endless empty pages. We often become disillusioned. This is not a perfect union. The work is not easy, but it is vital. Sometimes the words don't come to you to describe what you're going through, and the pen stays in your hand idle. I know so many people who hurt like I once did, phased and crazed on dark, dreary days, passive padded prison cells, a molten metal cage. But art will remember Nina Simone. She's already quite well known as a singer/revolutionary. In the wake of her words, audiences went mute. You could cut through the silence after strange fruit. She refused to be ignored. She refused to be quiet. She said what was necessary with no room to deny it. Art has never failed me, like my God in kind. I wrote, I heard a holy word that spurred into my mind. Graceful words can be a savior from pain-induced behavior when, like the constellations, they're aligned. To discover the divine, the quiet, a restless mind, a reason for breathing defined. We've been belittled and disparaged. We've been dismissed and forgotten, left to create all alone in the dust. But I have to believe that through each poem where you grieve, art will remember us. So put some pride into your neighborhood. Put some passion in your song. Some rhythm in the symphony that keeps us going strong. The next time you thwart death with creation, bring your craft back to your home. Remember every paint-stained conversation. Paint your streets as you roam. Cover in ink and canvas our whole lonely nation. Remember, even if it all burns like Rome. Call all the artists to an iridescent formation and craft a wholly American tome. And what we will make together, the bold ethereal, will belong to everyone whose spirits spin with the brilliant immaterial. And when we cry power, listen to the wake, the aftermath of creation, and all the worlds we shake. The divine kingdom of which we are all a part, the sensation of our nation, the nation of our art. Thank you.
Wow. Alora, thank you so much for that. Look at all the love. It is beyond an appreciation of what you just did. It is a revitalization I think we all need sometimes, especially when dealing with politics, especially in this time period, especially in this moment. So, as an organization, I believe, but also as an artist myself, I think everybody is wanting to shout out to you right now. Thank you, because that reinvigorated something in me. And I hope it has done that for a lot of people who I think are getting tired, who are tired. And we need to keep fighting. So thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how I'm going to speak after this. Thank you so much. I hope to have you back, and I can't wait to see everything that you do. Please support Alora and the amazing, multi-talented artist that she is. And we'll put the link to your website as well in here and share it. And I cannot wait to share that poem, that love cry for the arts out with the world. So again, I cannot say thank you enough. All right. Excuse me if I'm gonna have a little difficulty here. But I hope with what Alora has just reinvigorated us with and reminded us of, that this is the time, it is always the time to continue to take action, both in our communities and for our communities. But Americans for the Arts also has provided 2 ways for you to take action with us immediately. You can message your members of Congress using our Arts Action Center. We've drafted a Protect the NEA email letter for you to use, and we really encourage you to also customize that with your story. Making sure that it is personalized really helps to push this message and make sure that we are showing who we are to our members of Congress. We also have call scripts for you to use. There are so many emails being flooded into members' systems. So making that call, even if it's a 60-second call, it's really vital and important. Congressional offices track every single one and they report it back to leadership. So when they're hearing from us in large numbers, it moves votes. So please send a message that takes less than 2 minutes and go ahead and call. The link on the slide will take you to both resources. Please take action and please share that with your networks. We'd love to continue to push that forward. Next slide, Olivia. I also want you to know that you'll find all of our past office hours recordings, and you'll find in the coming days, very soon, the recording from this webinar. On our landing page, there will be resources attached that we shared today and the video recording. So you'll get a message from us via Zoom soon when that is uploaded. Next slide. As Nina reminded us, we have upcoming webinars and office hours where we're going to continue these important discussions. And so please go ahead and you can register now. The registration links are live. So the next one will be on November 14th. And then the final for 2025 will be December 12th. And then just our final slide here. Before we wrap up, I think this goes along to what Alora just helped and shared with us, that our experiences are so vital and so important. And I'm very proud as an Americans for the Arts employee to share a program and project that we're doing right now for National Arts and Humanities Month, which is called 50 Stories and 50 States, because our stories is what unites us. At this time, we need to show the impact of the arts and humanities on real lives and real communities, your communities. And I can't help but feel what Alora just said. And I really hope that you continue to share your stories, because that is how we are going to continue to fight. We're collecting short 30-second videos from people across all 50 states, U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia. And your story can help show lawmakers, decision makers, and the public why the arts matter and why they are so vital in all of our lives, both economically, for our mental health, for the soul of our nation. Let's continue to share that message and spread it as far and wide as we can. Our goal isn't to just collect the 50 stories. We want hundreds of voices from across the country, and your voice can shape the future of arts funding. Your story can remind people that creativity, like Alora said, isn't a luxury. It's essential to who we are as people. So please go to the link or use the QR code here and share your story. It matters, your voice matters, and together we can continue to protect the arts for generations to come. I hope you'll join us in doing this. Wow, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to all of our amazing speakers. Thank you to our acclaimed poet, Alora, and our staff. I'm so thrilled and I feel so lucky to be here and doing this job every day. Thank you all so much for what you do and hope you have a great weekend. Thanks. Goodbye.